There are many conspiracy theories that have proven to be true with the passage of time, so we have picked only 9 of the most blatant and dangerous ones that still haunt us to this day. Why? You will know once you start reading about the miraculous treatments and innovative foods and drinks that have done nothing but make people sick. Some of them still do. This is why it's important to understand that conspiracy theories that have proven to be true over the years are like a foreshadowing of what we're living today. What are conspiracy theories? The term conspiracy theory was first used by the CIA in 1967 to disqualify those who questioned the official version of John F. Kennedy's assassination and believed that Lee Harvey Oswald had not acted alone. Ever since, whenever people would not align with the official narrative, they were negatively labeled as conspiracy theorists. But why would someone not believe the official government narrative of one happening? We too wonder why. Perhaps it's because they've been deceived before, or maybe the official story seems too far-fetched. And if you add all the top-secret governmental institutions and this overwhelming secrecy around many elephants in the room, perhaps conspiracy theorists should actually be called critical thinkers instead. When our societies will become open to truth and honesty and have fewer secrets, perhaps conspiracy theorists aka critical thinkers will decline in numbers. But until then, keep an open mind and question everything. Let's get to the top 9 conspiracy theories that have proven to be true, and this is quite scary. 9. Mercury treatments are deadly. Starting with the mid-16th century, a new miraculous treatment started to gain more and more popularity amongst medical doctors. It was called calomel and was a mercury treatment. Yes, you heard that right. Doctors used one of the most toxic heavy metals to treat their patients for most conditions, ranging from melancholy, constipation, syphilis, influenza, and even parasites. Calomel or mercury chloride is one of the most toxic medicines ever used to treat people. Back in the 19th century, it was marketed as a miracle panacea, due to its strong purgative effects. Basically what it did was straight up poison patients with mercury, who then had severe and bloody diarrhea and a lot of foaming at the mouth, vomiting, and cramping. But these were just the milder forms of intoxication, which were believed to be signs that the body is purging the disease out by the medical doctors who used it. Hence, a fear of going to a doctor has soon spread out around the world, due to the fact that they felt sicker after taking the mercury treatments. Later, the same miracle mercury was used in the now famous amalgam fillings, that are still used today worldwide. Replacing amalgam fillings is a meticulous procedure because mercury from the fillings can leak into the body and cause mercury intoxication. Mainstream medicine still considers amalgam fillings to be safe, yet starting with July 2018 the EU prohibited amalgam for dental treatment of children under 15 years and of pregnant or breastfeeding women. We wonder why. Mercury is also still used today in influenza vaccine formulations, as thimerosal, and merthiolate, and some skin whitening creams, but given its high toxicity, we don't know why. Conspiracy theories still unrolling. 8. Smoking is not healthy. My mom was born in the 60s and grew up in the countryside. In the summer before going into college, she spent a week at her cousin's, who lived in the city. She didn't smoke, but her cousin did, as well as many of her friends. My mom's aunt scolded her for not smoking, because if you were not smoking back then it was considered not just uncool, but completely undesirable. 1 week later, my mom returned home with her first pack of cigarettes in her pocket, and she continued smoking for a good 20+ years since then. As weird as it sounds now, this was the reality back then, and the reason was that smoking was heavily promoted as being very cool, and not just that, even quite healthy. And it was not regular people claiming this, but science and medical doctors. The first scientists claiming otherwise, the conspiracy theorists of those times, namely Isaac Adler, who linked the rise in primary lung cancer to the consumption of cigarettes in 1912, Joseph Bloodgood, who demonstrated a link between tongue cancer and tobacco in 1921, the founder of the American Cancer Society Frederick Hoffman, who proved excessive smoking caused mouth and lung cancer in 1924, and Morton Lenvin, who analyzed hospital and showed a positive correlation between tobacco and lung cancer in 1950, to name a few. Despite the conspiracy theorists' growing evidence that smoking is causing cancer, the mainstream scientific and medical community of those times firmly insisted that these types of cancers are caused by industrial and automotive polluters, exhaust, coal fumes, and even race or ethnicity. Their train of thought was that everyone was smoking but not everyone developed lung cancer, so it is highly unlikely that a single preventable factor such as smoking can lead to such a complicated health condition. Fast forward today, science has proven that smoking is actually the #1 risk factor for lung cancer, not a highly unlikely probability. The sad thing is that it took approximately 100 years of denying the obvious facts, shaming and blaming the conspiracy theorist of those times, for the scientific and medical community to finally admit that something that they approved is actually slowly killing people. Even sadder is the suffering of people who believe smoking was good for them because that's what doctors told them. Smoking being healthy is one of the popular conspiracy theories proven to be true of the last century. 7. The miracle DDT. The miraculous bug repellent DDT was hyped back in the 40s as it was the first of the modern synthetic insecticides. DDT was heavily marketed by agriculture and farming as well as the medical industries as a magical means to keep pests at bay, but also as a way to combat malaria, typhus, and other insect-borne human diseases. It was also recommended to use all over the household to prevent polio epidemics. So that's exactly what housewives did. They drenched the entire home in DDT in the hopes to protect their children from disease-carrying bugs. It was later in 1949 when a Georgian farmer by the name of Dottie Colson wrote to the National Health Council in New York City for advice giving her concern for excess use of DDT in her hometown. She mentioned her own sensitivity to the insecticide, her daughter's continual sore throat, her dairy cows falling mysteriously ill as well as her baby chicks and honeybees dying. In short, DDT was destroying small farmers' way of life. Dottie and her sister Mamiella Plyler were the conspiracy theorists raising their voices against the official DDT narrative on how miraculous this chemical was in fighting insect-borne illnesses during the Second World War. According to historian James Horton, early warnings about DDT were generally dismissed as hysteria. Does this sound familiar much? It was almost 20 years later in 1962, after Rachel Carson's book Silent Spring was published, when people started to look at DDT differently. She protested the contamination of man's total environment with substances that accumulate in the tissues of plants, animals, and humans and have the potential to alter the genetic structure of organisms and even cause cancers. Carson remains an example of what one committed individual can do to change the direction of society. She was a revolutionary spokesperson for the rights of all life. She dared to speak out and confront the issue of the destruction of nature and to frame it as a debate over the quality of all life. 7 years after the publication of Carson's book, the USDA cancels the registration of certain uses of DDT. 1 year later it cancels DDT applications on crops, commercial plants, wood products, and buildings, and by 1989, DDT is completely cancelled for all uses in the USA. Today DDT is a known persistent organic pollutant, POPs, and is part of the family of the dirty dozen, like chemicals that continue to pollute the air and water years and years after discontinuation in use. But the hidden story of chemical air spraying pollutants goes on, as well as the conspiracy theories around them. 6. Chemtrails. Conspiracy theories around toxic chemicals sprayed into the air are not finished, not yet. While the personal and industrial use of DDT has been completely banned since 1989, people have started to complain about another danger lurking in the air. That is chemtrails. The name chemtrail is a portmanteau of two words, chemical and trail. Chemtrails are geoengineered aerosols that contain toxic chemicals sprayed from high altitudes from airplanes. They are the white dense trails that planes leave behind. What makes them different from contrails is that, instead of disappearing quickly afterward, they dissipate and form a fine net of whitish dust into the sky, making it hard for the sun to reach the earth. They are not the same as contrails, which are the clouds formed by the plane engine exhaust that we see in the air. Waters have shown high levels of heavy metals in areas where massive chemtrails were sprayed, including aluminum, strontium, barium, and thorium. While the term may seem to be fabricated by conspiracy theorists who claim that planes spray unknown and possibly toxic chemicals into the air, it actually appears in an official document, a bill dating back to October 2, 2001. The bill proposed a permanent ban on weapons in space, and here chemtrails are mentioned under the subparagraph B of exotic space weapon systems, alongside electronic, psychotronic, or information weapons and many others that sound quite worrying. The bill was introduced by Republican Dennis Kucinich, Ohio, nearly 18 years ago and has no co-sponsors, but unfortunately, 1 year later the Department of Defense gave the bill an unfavorable executive comment. Chemtrails are sophisticated weapon systems aimed to control the weather through geoengineered aerosols that contain toxic chemicals, and there's evidence for this. This is also backed and confirmed by a 1966 NASA document that speaks of the National Weather Modification Program, and at least one U.S. patent entitled Weather Modification Process dating from 1970, and many more geoengineering patents, all related to weather manipulation. More so, herbicidal warfare is not news, is it? The purpose of all these secret technologies? Whoever controls the weather and what falls from the sky, we mean toxic chemicals, has control over the crops and can destroy our sustainability and independence with the click of a button. Chemtrails are real, and even if this is a rather fresh conspiracy theory, evidence is piling up, making it mathematically impossible for this to be just one of those crazy conspiracy theories. Time will definitely tell, hopefully before it's too late. 5. Radioactive skin care. Believe it or not, there was a time not long ago when radioactive skincare products were selling like crazy, and people like you and me, who know the dangers of radioactivity, were considered conspiracy theorists. Figure that out. We're talking about the Radium Girls, a generation of women who did everything to keep up with the beauty standards of the mid-1920s. This is one of the late-century conspiracy theories proven to be true. Shortly after radium was discovered by famous chemist Marie Curie, the U.S. Radium Corporation started to use it in the form of glow-in-the-dark radioactive paint for clock faces of luminous watches used by the U.S. Army. It was a novelty of that time. Women were the ones hired to paint the watches with the radioactive paint, totally ignorant of the dangers they were in. Soon enough they started to get really sick, and their sad story ends in one of the most popular lawsuits of the mid-1920s. Before people started to realize how poisonous radium is, the mass media has already done enough harm in popularizing the miraculous healing and beautifying effects of radioactivity. Hence, radioactive face creams and lotion, beauty powders, and even toothpaste and radioactive water were hype at the beginning of the 1930s. Radior, though Radia, and Radathor were only a few brands of radium-containing products that were selling women mirages of and slow death by the bottle. But there's more. Arsenic-containing soaps and hair treatments based on cocaine were also the norms back in the day. It was only decades later when people realized how dangerous radioactivity is and conspiracy theorists started to speak up against the radiating skin beauty products. The radioactive beauty products have vanished off the market, but the damage has been done. Today the heavy metals beauty industry has been replaced by a far more raffinate beauty industry, based on chemicals such as phthalates, parabens, talcum powders, nanoparticles, formaldehyde, lead acetate, coal tar, UV filters, camphor, triclosan, resorcinol, toluene, butylated hydroxyanisole, BHA, and many other chemicals present in our cosmetics and beauty products. I wonder how many decades will pass until conspiracy theories will hit again and the cosmetics industry will change again for the better. 4. The toxic household. Asbestos, lead and enamel paints, formaldehyde, and other extremely toxic materials were heavily marketed as miraculous discoveries by the beginning and mid-20th century. Ads with the Dutch boy lead paint were popular beginning in 1907, while asbestos was the magic mineral used in all sorts, from fireproof clothing for firefighters, and gas mask filters to even dental cast linings and dining table pads. But asbestos mainly had multiple uses in construction. After all, it was considered the magic mineral at the beginning of the last century. And so did the conspiracy theories around it. Everybody loved asbestos due to its malleability, and resistance to chemicals, heat, water, and electricity. That is until 1927 when there are records of the first known workers' compensation claim for asbestos-related disease filed as asbestos mining workers were getting really sick. In the 1930s asbestos companies have done their research on the health impact of asbestos but keep the results away from the public eye because the industry was thriving and they didn't want to lose money. Needless to say what their studies have found. So the asbestos industry was going strong for the next 20 years until the 1960s when medical studies confirmed that asbestos causes mesothelioma, a form of cancer caused by exposure to asbestos in 80% of the cases. But it was only by the late 1970s when the demand for asbestos was declined after people began to understand the negative health impact of this material. In 2005, asbestos was banned throughout the European Union, but it is still not banned in the US. Although several Congress bills tried to ban asbestos by creating a national mesothelioma registry, in June 2018, the EPA announced that it would consider new uses of asbestos. One can never understand why this decision, given asbestos' proven toxicity. A similar story goes for lead paint. Although the health concerns related to lead poisoning started to appear as early as the beginning of the 20th century, for some reason the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission lead-based paints and products were banned as late as 1977, after all the conspiracy theories regarding the dangers of lead paint exposure were proven to be right. The household was toxic back then, and still is to this day. Enamel paints, oil or synthetic-based stains, cancer-causing formaldehyde, lead water pipes, Teflon pans, PTFE, BPA plastics, fossil fuels, and other synthetic construction materials that leak out volatile compounds into the air, slowly poisoning us without even knowing. Thus the sick building syndrome. Conspiracy much? 3. Drugs used as medicine. Heroin, cocaine, opium, morphine, codeine, cannabis, chloroform, meth, strychnine, and alcohol were some of the ingredients used in baby syrups and medicine for teething, soothing a crying or restless baby. Yes, these were the official medical treatments in the late 1800s, according to the mainstream medicine of those times. Hence, conspiracy theories based on contradictory facts started to bubble up. Cocaine toothache drops were a big hit and marketed for children starting with 1885, while even earlier medicines such as Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, 1849, or Sozodont tooth powder, 1859, loaded with the good stuff such as morphine, opiates, alcohol, heroin, and other narcotics and toxic ingredients were hype and used in most households to soothe crying and teething babies. In 1898, Bayer began marketing straight-up heroin as a cough suppressant, on a commercial scale. Yes, the same company you probably have heard about, still selling drugs today. Now it makes sense why they still call them drugs. With over 1.5 million bottles sold annually, Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup continued to be sold until the 1930s, despite the producer having to remove heroin from its formulation. The reason was that babies were dropping like flies after taking this syrup. And this is just one of the many toxic drugs that were prescribed as medicine in the early 20th century. All of these wonderful and innovative medicines and many more others were used for at least 100 years and some are still used today, under different names and branding. Is this another of those conspiracy theories proved to be true? Absolutely. 2. Sugar makes you slim. Processed sugar, a known neurological toxin 7 times more addictive than cocaine, was marketed as a weight loss solution back in the 60s. Don't believe me? See it for yourself. Seems like science back then had exactly the opposite information from the science of today. Just like heroin and meth, sugar is destroying the tooth enamel, leading to cavities, and creates addiction. More so, sugar is highly inflammatory, paving the way for viruses, bacteria, fungi, and other toxic pathogens to thrive inside the body. Even worse, sugar has been linked to yeast infection, it feeds cancer cells, and is the main cause of obesity, which opens the door to many other chronic illnesses. In the 1960s there was a study called Project 259 that proved the link between sugar and cancer. The results of the study showing the causality between sucrose and hyperlipidemia and cancer have been kept secret. So how is hiding truth okay and not a conspiracy against public health in itself? For the sugar industry, making money is far more important than our health. While they are still trying to push the idea that sugar is safe, history has proven that this is not their first lie. Remember the sugar can help you lose weight campaign back in the 60s and 70s? That's just one example. Hence, the sugar conspiracy theories go on. 1. The toxic food. Did you know that butter was promoted as natural lubrication for the veins and arteries when eaten in large quantities? Or that soda drinks were straight up promoted for young kids, including Coca-Cola, containing coca extract, and even alcohol? Yes, alcohol was marketed as good for little tots, if you can believe this. Sugar was also heavily pushed as great for kids, alongside dextrose and many other junk sweeteners. Not you again with those conspiracy theories. But wait, there were even vitamin-fortified donuts, and if it weren't for the vintage ads, we wouldn't have even imagined it, not believed this to actually be true. The food industry was poisoning not only the bodies but also the minds of the people of the last century with fake claims that their actually toxic foods are healthy, cool, and good for you. The propaganda was real. Similar to what we see today, right? Just that today, decades after, we have more and more piling evidence that sodas are addicted and cause obesity due to the high amounts of sugar, donuts, and never going to make it on the healthy foods list, and alcohol is not good for adults, needless to say for kids. Who even came up with this brilliant idea? No wonder the conspiracy theories around it. It seems that, just like with the other revolutionary industries, the foods industry is the same trial and error, but on our health and well-being. How can years and years of sickness and poor health be repaired with a "we didn't know, we're sorry," especially when history keeps repeating itself? GMO crops and seeds, Monsanto, fluoride in our tap water, MSG, aspartame, and other highly toxic food additives are still continued to be commercialized at the expense of our own health. So the question is, who conspires against who? Bottom line, conspiracy theories will continue to exist as long as truth is hidden and what we are told doesn't make sense. People are awakening to the fact that the institutions that should protect us are the ones making profits selling us their crap. Studies are sponsored by the industry giants, scientists are bribed, and the real evidence is kept hidden. Until this will continue to happen, rest assured that conspiracy theories will continue to be proven right, and more will follow. The truth will set you free, so always look for the truth. Thank you and have a great day.